We're ready to go. You can just give it to. Welcome to the Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, February 9th. I apologize for starting a little late. We were a little late in getting out of our executive session. Anyone have any announcements? Mr. Franco.
I wanted to compliment the Brookline Asian Family Alliance on their wonderful Pan-Asian New Year, Lunar New Year celebration last Saturday at the high school. I attended, and it was a great community celebration that featured a number of performances and celebrations of the Asian New Year. So, compliments to the group for organizing and to all the performers and people who attended.
Great. Anyone else? Okay. Now moving on to public comment. We have a new public comment policy. No advance sign-up is required. And Mr. Conquest, you have up to 5 minutes.
Okay, won't be that long. Isn't it happy, Arthur Conquest, 115 Tappan? Isn't it the year of the monkey?
Yes.
Right? Happy Year of the Monkey. Number 10 of the new public comment rule, the chair, and I quote, "The chair of the meeting may terminate any individual's privilege of address for inappropriate conduct or statement is too vague and is left to the whim of the select person who is the chair of the meeting. What constitutes inappropriate conduct or statements for one select person at a given board meeting may be perfectly acceptable for another select person who is chairing the public comment period at another given board meeting of the selectmen's meeting. What's inappropriate conduct or statements for Neil Wyshynski as chair may be acceptable to, say, Ben Franco or Nancy Heller when and if they are chairs. I'm going to use an example, though it's slightly off the margins, but relevant nonetheless. Fire Department Lieutenant Paul Pender was overheard using the N-word on a black firefighter, Gerald Alston's answering machine, and he was subsequently promoted to the rank of captain in the police department.
You mean the fire department?
Fire department, excuse me. I used the word house servant and not specifically directed at any individual, and I was publicly criticized. And my application to join the old Human Relations Youth Resource Commission was rejected by the same group of selectmen, two of whom presently are on the dais, who approved the promotion of Lieutenant Paul Pender to the rank of captain. I could use other examples, but I think this is just, it sort of grates at me because it gets to the point of social control and what you think or what the chair thinks is acceptable for someone who's white, and then another person who's black, which is totally unacceptable to them. And I think you should clarify what you mean by inappropriate conduct or statements in when you're chair and reviewing what people say when they come to the microphone during public comment period. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll take that under advisement. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Conquest. Moving on. Minutes for February 2nd. I have some changes.
I had some edits as well.
Yeah, I gave my edits to
Okay.
Mr. Nicholas.
So I will move approval of the minutes as amended. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next item is the question of approving,
We
we
had
have
two
to.
sets of
yeah,
minutes.
yeah. So this is a question of approving the minutes of January 21st, our joint meeting with the school committee. Any changes?
Could we put those off? I haven't
Yeah,
read them.
I'm
I looked
going
at them,
to.
I didn't realize we were gonna be taking them
Yeah,
off.
okay, so we'll table that for next time. Question?
Sorry, I just want to ask, because I will not be here next week, I'm out of the
So wh-
country.
so why don't you
And
just-
Are we going to have a quorum to vote on those minutes? Because, let me just
We'll
see who's there.
have three of us. We'll have Selectman Heller, Green, and myself.
Oh, yeah, so, you were not present at that meeting,
Oh.
were you?
Which meeting?
It says Waschinsky, Daly, and Heller.
That's
So
the meeting
I
you
don't
missed.
think you were,
Oh, okay.
I don't think you
Okay,
were
we
present.
may not have a
So
quorum,
I'm
so we-
suggesting we vote them now because I'm here and only three
Oh,
of
yeah,
us.
you weren't here.
I thought it was for the most recent meeting.
No. Okay, so let's vote them. Any,
I didn't have any changes,
I don't
no.
have,
I don't have any changes.
okay, so all those in favor of approving the joint 12116 minutes with the school committee, all those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
I abstain.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Abstain too.
And the chair votes aye. Okay. Question of approving Cuddy's facade loan application in the amount of $9,000. Mr. Martineau, are you presenting that?
Andy Martineau, planner for the town. This is a facade loan application for Cuddy's Sandwiches just over here on Washington Street in the village. If the board remembers or recalls, this is, the town has a facade loan program that is aimed at incentivizing businesses and property owners to invest in and make improvements to the facade of their buildings and businesses. Cuddy's is in the process of expanding, which I think will be great. Business is booming, and if you've ever done pickup there, it can be challenging. And so as they move through renovations, they've learned about the facade loan program, thought it would be a good idea to help them accomplish what they want to do, expanding into the neighboring storefront. And their application really is a case in point of why the program exists. The renovations include a number of changes for new energy efficient glass, windows and doors, and also restoring some of the transom windows that tend to get covered up over time and then hopefully re-exposed here in Brookline, restoring some of the building's architectural features and character. So really all around a good application and something that we're excited about and that EDAB has endorsed to move forward. So I'm here for final approval.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to just say that I, somewhere in here, I think there was a picture of what it's going to look like. And, I thought
B6 of our packet.
Okay, it was way better than what's there, so I think this is
And
very
the-
much a good use of that money.
And the idea is to do the same to their existing storefront once they get the new space open. So it'll be uniform.
Right.
Can I?
Yes.
I understand that this building dates back to the late 1800s, is that correct? I thought I read somewhere 1876.
I think the preservation folks are meeting downstairs.
On page B4 of our packet, it says the property was built in 1876 to 1877.
Wow, Selectman Franco, way to memorize these write-ups.
Within the Brookline Village National Register District as well.
So do we know, is this going to look anything like it did in 1876 to 1877?
My preservation colleagues advised me that it's going to be similar and a vast improvement on what's there now. This is, interestingly enough, anytime we have a facade improvement of this nature, we usually coordinate with the preservation staff to make sure that the changes being made are for the better and not for the worse. And looking through the files, this is one building where we didn't have the traditional front and center view of what it might have looked like or what it did look like
Right.
back in the day, so to speak. So, but given what they know about the commercial area and what those type of buildings usually look like. Their advice is that what you see is probably pretty close to what was there before.
Okay. And you've answered my other question as to whether you had consulted with preservation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's clear that the transoms that are going to be put in there are probably closer to the 1800s than the air conditioning that are there now.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Therefore, I'll move approval of the Cuddy's facade loan application in the amount of $9,000. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
The next item is the question of approving the response letter on 40B project at 1180 Boylston Street. We had a public hearing last weekend, and based on the comments that we heard, staff has drafted a letter that summarizes the comments. Does anyone wish to summarize the comments? Ms. Steinfeld?
Certainly, I hope the planning department captured the
And
direction.
you are?
Allison Steinfeld, planning director, I'm sorry. I hope we captured your recommendations to be incorporated into the letter. As a reminder, this is a response to Mass Housing, which is reviewing an application for a project eligibility letter. Assuming Mass Housing does in fact issue that letter, then the applicant will come before the town and actually submit an application for a comprehensive permit to the Zoning Board of Appeals, at which point the ZBA process begins.
Yes,
Well,
Selectman
I
Daley.
was happy to see you'd mention the size of the project, the impact on the nearby neighbors, the traffic congestion at that area, and the parking situation. I thought those were all important points, and I saw you got them all, along with others, but
Good, and I fully anticipate there will be more issues that will be raised as we get more information from the developer.
Right. Yeah, my examination, I thought you captured the comments from the public and our comments afterwards.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a well-written letter. There was a slight revision today, just to bring my colleagues' attention to a change that was made, about adding a request that we engage in a conversation potentially about a transportation demand management program.
where is that?
It's on page 3 of the letter, the second paragraph on page 3. In order to try and help alleviate the traffic problems that we've identified in the
Yeah,
parking
Okay.
concerns that we have.
Okay.
I don't recall in the public hearing that we heard about the issue with that the fire chief has with the regarding the fire load of the proposed building, particularly as it relates to the underground parking. Do you know anything more about that?
Yes, first of all, we're within a very limited time frame to present this response. So
Right.
under normal circumstances, I would like to give you all the facts. But during the public hearing, it became increasingly clear that the proposed underground parking was certainly problematic. And consequently, in part as a result of your direction, we went to both the building commissioner and the fire chief to solicit more comments. We provided them with opportunities, but we thought it warranted expressly going out and showing them the plans to say, does this make sense to you? And clearly it didn't.
Okay, thank you.
Selectman Green?
Yeah, I thought the letter was very well written also. However, on page 2, the first full paragraph there talks about, we are saying that the applicant should reduce the number of stories for the building. We're saying therefore, it seems to me, more than likely, that we're telling them that they should make the building financially unfeasible. I mean, is that really something that we should be saying?
I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah.
If anything, we try to define a fine line between the Board of Selectmen basically recommending to the developer and the Zoning Board of Appeals, which we have to be a little careful with. Ultimately, the zoning board of appeals will determine if the extent of the conditions they want to propose, and the developer will indicate if that's onerous, at which point we come to a pro forma. But there's no point in the process at this point to request a pro forma.
Right. I mean, I guess my thought was, should that say that we, therefore, we suggest the applicant consider reducing the number of stories instead? And to say that you have to reduce the number of stories is sort of a red flag that says, we're telling them to do something that could make it just not feasible.
Then we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I would push back on
Yeah,
that.
I can promise you that the agency okaying this will not give too much weight to our comments, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I think if we think it's too big, I think it behooves us to say that we think it's too big, and then the burden shifts to the developer, or if we get that far, but then that would be through the ZBA, to say it's not financially feasible. Then it seems to me it would be up to the ZBA to say, prove it, and ask for pro forma. That doesn't always happen, though, as we know.
Since our meeting last week, I had occasion to drive out there a couple of times, and I have to say, I totally agree with this statement, the proposed structure overwhelms the site. It's so clear when you look at it, and how close it will be to those other affordable housing units. It's very, very clear that it's just too big. So I hope that Mass Housing actually goes and takes a look, because I think you really get the picture when you do that.
Mass Housing has already conducted a site visit, so they have been there. I fully anticipate that Mass Housing, consistent with past policy, will issue a PEL. And then it's incumbent upon the planning department and the zoning board of appeals and the developer to try to work together to refine the proposal. I do think that their parking makes absolutely no sense. And I know the building commissioner is very much opposed to it. I'm opposed to it. It's not going to work. And there's one of two ways they can address that: either build another level of parking underground or reduce the number of units. That's obviously a preliminary analysis, and we'll submit a traffic impact report, and we'll go from there. But we will be diligent. I mean, and there's certainly, my office is very concerned. They have with the house next door, there's a personal stake. I mean, the planners who worked on that project. So there's a particular commitment to protect the residents there to the extent we can.
Right.
Is it the stackers that you don't think are going to work in the parking, or is it the configuration of the lot itself?
It's the configuration, it's the stackers, and the fact that they're saying they need a valet 24/7. I mean, let's face it, in a few years, the valet's not going to be there, or the stackers aren't going to work. That parking will flow out into the neighborhood, which is the last thing we want. And obviously, the fire commissioner has safety issues as well. The building commissioner has enforcement issues.
Any other comments? So therefore, I will move that we approve the response letter on the Chapter 40B project at 1180 and authorize the chair to sign it on the board's behalf.
The one marked revised, correct?
Correct. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're moving on to the main calendar, and the first item is the question of appointing the following candidate as a firefighter effective February 15th, 2016, which happens to be my birthday. Walter Francis, Deputy Chief of Operations Ward.
Rob Ward, yes.
Yes.
Good evening. This is firefighter Walt, hopefully soon to be firefighter again, Walter Francis. Walter worked with us from January 2004 till he resigned in August of 2015. I tried everything I could to keep him, but he had to go to Colorado with his family. He's coming back. He's asked to rejoin the fire department. The board gave us a conditional offer of employment back in November. Walter has passed all his tests, and now we're asking him to be hired as a full-time Brookline firefighter to begin on February 15th of 2016.
Well, welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Francis, I will just say you have proved true all our feelings about how our fire department is an excellent one. You couldn't stay away. So that's very good.
No, ma'am. It's an honor and a pleasure to have the ability to come back and work for the town of Brookline. Some of you have been here for a long time. You might remember I was actually a firefighter that was laid off from Springfield, Mass. And that's how I came here back in 2004. It was nice to be able to find a home here, and it was definitely a heart-wrenching experience to look at leaving Brookline when I never intended to go anywhere else. I did make a decision for my family to look to go out to Colorado. Unfortunately, sometimes there are things in life that work a certain way that cause some of those changes that you decide to make not to work out. But I will say that I am happy that I've had the opportunity to look to possibly come back to a place that I never wanted to leave. It has been, again, an honor to work in the town, to get to know the administrators, a lot of the constituents that I know. It's nice to see those families that you see that pop by the firehouse all the time, the runs that we do, and just the ability to serve the community in the way that we do. Again, I'm glad to be here with Chief Ward. I'm glad to be able to stand back in front of you folks again. I'm looking to see if I can return to my career and finish it in Brookline like I should have done in the first place.
We're glad you didn't like the weather out there.
Is the weather out there any worse than here?
It has been. They've had a lot of snow this year, much more than we have.
I hope you weren't there long enough to become a Denver Broncos fan.
Absolutely not. I was actually very disappointed this past Sunday.
Yeah, me too.
But, they have a few people there that get to brag and call me a little bit now because they're able to win that Super Bowl.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Okay, any other comments? So I will, what am I, okay, I'm going to move approval of the appointment of the following candidates boy, I'm tongue-tied here, as a firefighter effective February 15th, 2016. Walter Francis. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Selectman Daley, Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Walter.
Do you want a photo or?
Please.
Oh, okay. Thought maybe it was getting to be old hat.
I didn't want to assume, though.
Right here, right in the middle.
Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Harvey Brovman will appear to update the board on the charge of the Holocaust Witness Committee. Mr. Brovman, welcome.
Thank you. I'm Harvey Bravman, publisher of Brookline Hub and owner of Advanced Digital Websites, and really happy to be part of this Holocaust project. Lloyd Gillenow was supposed to also be here, but has a conflicting human resource meeting that he has to attend, so I'm sort of reading this for both of us, I guess. The mission of the Brookline Holocaust Witness Project is to share the stories of Holocaust survivors who made Brookline their home with a wider audience in the format of a feature-length documentary film. By presenting the truth of this tragic time in history through the words and memories of our Brookline neighbors, the messages are brought to life and made real and relatable for present-day viewers. Harvey Bravman, the director of the work, I guess that's me, Lloyd wrote that part, intends for the impact of the film to also raise awareness of similar and ongoing human rights crises and those in Brookline that are refugees and survivor of those conflicts. Involved in the creation of this piece will be first converting all of the analog video, there is almost 100 hours of it, to a digital format. These interviews were taken in the early 1990s, most of them at Brookline Interactive Group, and they're in formats called SVHS and 3/4 inch. So they belong, the tapes themselves belong in a museum. But identifying archival footage to supplement and enhance individual interviews. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, there's a section called the Steven Spielberg Film and Video Archives. They've told us that we could use probably about 75 or 80% of what they have will be available to us. He writes here, an editing process that will include scripting, music, and cinematography to craft a powerful viewing experience. I guess it'll be up to the viewer to determine if it's powerful, but we're making it so that we hope it will be. In addition to working with existing footage, new interviews will be included with survivors, those who conducted the original interviews, and key individuals relating to the subject matter. Original artifacts and memory pieces from survivors will also be carefully sought and included. Funding support is necessary for this process and to subsequently curate the finished piece and source material in a publicly available format. The revitalization of the Brookline Holocaust Witness Project Committee will be instrumental in completing this project for completing the following: increasing awareness of the project to the community, develop funding sources and sponsors to enable project completion, provide financial oversight and approval of project funds. The list of applicants, do you want me to read that?
You can just read it quickly.
Sure.
We'll be appointing them later tonight.
Kathy Bisbee, who's the executive director of Brookline Interactive Group, Ken Goldstein, who's a former Brookline Selectman, and besides Neil and Lloyd Gillenow and myself, also two other members that are really appreciate their wanting to be involved. Olivia Siegel, who was a Brookline High School senior, whose grandmother survived the Holocaust, and Olivia spends a lot of time with her and actually used her experiences with her grandmother to revitalize the shop program at Brookline High School. And Ingrid Cooper, who is a 32-year resident of Brookline and was on the 23 years as a Brookline town meeting member, but both her parents survived 3 concentration camps and the Lodz ghetto. So she's really has a lot to offer, I think.
Okay, any questions?
I'm delighted to see that, I think this is really important stuff, and I'm delighted to see something's finally being done with it, because it was kind of frustrating to hear that these interviews had all taken place and then kind of gotten lost in a box somewhere. So, but I assume that you're going to get some visual material from people's archives or whatever to intersperse with these interviews.
That's right. So we're going to do our best. A lot of these, these interviews happened so long ago. A lot of these survivors aren't with us anymore. We've done a lot of work already, just volunteering, and tracked down people in all different states that don't live in. A lot of people live with family. They lived here, and now they live with family outside of the area. So we're going to get as much of that as we can. One of the things that the Spielberg archives, that the people there told us, which I thought was really cool, is most of these, especially those that lived in Poland, the shtetls, they have video of the shtetls pre-World War II on almost every shtetl. So we can also show, to give people an idea of where they lived before World War II. So it'd be, and these interviews are pretty amazing because they take you from their whole life growing up, and then World War II, and then after World War II. It's a pretty amazing journey. And
well, I actually know of one Holocaust survivor who just moved to town to be near her daughter who lives here. So.
Is it the Olivia Siegel's grandmother?
I don't think so.
Oh, that's really cool.
So if you want
Yes.
that information,
That would be great.
yeah. Okay.
That Olivia Siegel, her grandmother lived in Florida and moved here to be closer to the family. And so Olivia just every day visited her grandmother, and she's already started her own video interviews before she even found out about this commission. So it's great to have someone who's older than I am in the committee with that kind of experience, and someone who's just a teenager and how it affects her.
Okay, so we'll be making the appointments tonight, and then the committee will get going.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Do
you.
we vote the charge at this time?
The charge has been voted.
Oh, it has,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's just been a while since anything's
Yeah.
happened, so I thought it would
Okay.
be a good idea to raise the awareness of the committee. So the next item on the agenda is the Bicycle Advisory Committee, the question of approving the Bicycle Advisory Committee submission of a bicycle-friendly community application to the League of American Bicyclists. Ms. Snow, welcome.
Thank you. Cynthia Snow, Chair of the Brookline Bicycle Advisory Committee. You already heard what I'm seeking. I'm pleased to let you know that the Brookline Transportation Board, which appoints us and to whom we report, unanimously voted at their meeting last Thursday to approve submission of this application, which we've been working on for quite some time. And I think you have my memo and a little bit of material from the application before you. I'm happy to answer any questions or elaborate if you wish me to.
So what does this do for us?
It shows us to be good guys.
Okay.
in the
Doesn't bring
bicycling-
money?
In the bicycling community. And there are now, how many? I looked it up today. 372 communities across the country, 9 of them in Massachusetts, that have this designation. And there's a hierarchy. You very often start at bronze and move up the ladder as you develop more safer and more bicycle-friendly accommodations throughout the town. So they're helpful with advice in terms of where you're strong and where you're weak and what you might do differently. So it doesn't cost us anything, which is always nice.
Does it give us anything? Do we get money along with it? Is there a grant program?
No, we get, but it certainly, if we should be applying for money, it won't hurt us to be able to say that we're a community. We do get a couple of signs that we can post in various entrances to town that say, this is a bicycle-friendly community.
Well, I've been trying to get that this is an age-friendly community on the sign, so with little success, I think.
So I noticed that one of the aspects that you say that we're in need of improvement is education, so there's a successful Safe Routes program presented in elementary school. Does any of the education also bring into it elements of that bicyclists, just like anybody else, must conform to the rules of the road? Because when, at least in my experience, when bicyclists, blow through a red light, that whenever there's a funding request for anything related to bikes, that's the first thing people bring up. Oh my gosh, the bikes are just blowing through red lights, and it seems to me that should be a real
Believe
component.
me, that's the first thing I hear when anybody knows that I have anything to do with bicycles. We do have some written materials. We have information on our website about state laws. We do advocate that people obey traffic laws. And that's certainly one of the needs for education, and that's for young people when they're being educated in the school by the police officers for safety's sake. That's certainly the kind of thing that they're going to hear about. And the League of American Bicyclists certifies cycling instructors. There are no certified instructors in Brookline, but there are a number in the greater Boston area, and they do offer courses which include both a period of classroom instruction, which includes rules of the road, as well as some on-road, or at least in parking lot, kinds of experiences about how to ride safely. I mean, it's very important, and that's certainly something that we promote. We do have some little booklets from the League of American Bicyclists, which I give out at events that we attend, like the Brookline Day last fall at Lars Anderson. So we're doing what we can. We're a small committee. Our chief charge is to advise the Transportation Board, but we try to do as much as we can in that direction.
Selectman Heller.
When I attended the Mass Municipal Association meeting a few weeks ago, we heard an interesting talk by a fellow from Washington, D.C., and he spoke about the efforts of a man who there, and unfortunately I didn't get his name, but it had to do with drawing up maps of routes for bicyclists that take them on less traveled streets. It's a safety plan, but it was also, as I understood it, a plan to bring some, I wouldn't say joy, but enjoyment out of the views around you, pretty streets with pretty houses, streets with lots of trees, that kind of thing. And I'm wondering whether there has been any effort by the committee, and whether the education you're talking about encompasses that kind of thing.
We are working on a bike map for Brookline that will not, we have one on our website that just shows our plans and what's been done and what hasn't, but we would like to have a map that shows different levels of safety. That is, where are there sharrows, where are there bike lanes, where are there protected bike lanes, where are there quiet streets. So that's sort of our first step. We do have a local volunteer who's an expert in this area. Unfortunately, he's been so busy with overseas consulting that we haven't gotten very far with the project, but it's certainly on our plans to do something like that.
I wonder if you'll just talk a little bit about the third aspect of action that you're hoping to advance based on this application. We've talked about education, we've talked about advancing the Green Route program. reason number 3 is sort of getting at this interested but concerned population, making them feel comfortable riding in Brookline. What do we have in the future? What's on tap to bring that population onto the roads?
Well, we have quite a number of projects. I think whenever you put make additional bicycle accommodations available, we've seen a shift in where people ride, because they will aim for where they feel most comfortable. Unfortunately, most of those so-called interested but concerned riders, or potential riders, it's a group that's been studied nationally. It's a term that's used in the bicycle community. For most of them, it really means separation from moving traffic. And that's very hard to achieve in towns, well, anywhere in eastern Massachusetts, because of the age of the roads and the narrowness of the roads and the lack of grid that will put a less traveled street parallel to a well-traveled streets. So to some extent, it's a question of where can we make compromises, and that's something that we hear about whenever we have a public hearing about, and I'm sure you will hear about this one, which is we're trying to do something about the outbound hill on Beacon Street, which is a very dangerous, perceived and is a very dangerous area for cyclists. So until we can really make big advances, it's going to be hard to get a lot of those people on bicycles. And it's too bad, because we're a compact town. Many of the journeys that people make are very short, to school, to the grocery store, to Coolidge Corner, to the coffee shop, whatever, that would be wonderful to make on bikes. And if we could get people to reduce the short trips they make in cars, it would be good for everybody, because it would decrease the amount of traffic. But it's a tough nut.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? So, okay, I'll move that we approve the Bicycle Advisory Committee's submission of a bicycle-friendly community application to the League of American Bicyclists. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. We have noticed a public hearing on the Pudding Stone at Chestnut Hill 40B project for 8 o'clock. I'm going to take a 5-minute recess and allow Mr. Geller to set up, and then we'll start on time.
I was over there on Friday. Beautiful.
Where's Bernard? Okay.
for him, but you don't wait for me.
Dig. Okay, we're ready to start. This is a public hearing on the application of Chestnut Hill Realty, Hancock Village, for the construction of pudding stone at Chestnut Hill, a 40B project off of Independence Drive. And what the process is for a 40B project, the developer submits an application for, to a subsidizing agency for a project eligibility letter, and then the Board of Selectmen are asked initially to make comments on the project eligibility letter. And in formulating our comments, we ask our department heads to look at the project and make comments, and we'll also solicit comments from the public. This is the very first step. There's lots of process after this. And one thing I'll just make clear that we're not really going to comment on is design and facade and that kind of stuff. We'll comment on massing, on whether we think it's a good project, it's right for the town, things like that. But you know, is the color of the facade correct? You know, that's really not our purview, and that would be later on in the process. So this is the second of 3 40B hearings that we're having in the month of February. We're in a cycle where we're getting a bunch of 40B applications, and then there's going to be another hearing in 2 weeks on a project proposal at 40 Center Street. Is that correct? Yeah. Thank you. And there was one last week that we voted approval of our comment letter for 1180 Boylston Street at Hammond. So the way we did it last time is we asked the applicant to present the project to us. The board asked questions, and then we opened it up to public comment. And then the board tried to summarize what we heard to help staff draft the memo. And I think it worked last time, that format, so I'll continue. We have one success under our belts in terms of getting through this, so I think we have a winning formula. So, Mr. Levin, welcome.
Good evening, Chairman Wyszynski, board members, Mr. Kleckner, planning staff. My name is Mark Levin with Chestnut Hill Realty. We're going to give you a brief presentation of Pudding Stone at Chestnut Hill, our second 40B at Hancock Village. We're really here to answer your questions during your comment period. So at the end, we'd be more than happy to entertain them. First off, Steve Schwartz, our 40B permitting attorney, will make a few comments, and then Joe Geller will give some description of the site as well as the building designs, and then I'll talk about the program itself. Steve?
Good evening. I'm Stephen Schwartz with the firm of Goulston and Stores in Boston, representing the applicant Pudding Stone at Chestnut Hill LLC, which, as Mark just mentioned, is an affiliate of Chestnut Hill Realty. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you this evening and to present the project and to answer your questions. Just take a minute to kind of go through the process that we're in. which it sounds like you're becoming more and more familiar with, so I won't take up too much of your time on that. We have submitted an application for project eligibility with subsidizing agency, Mass Development. Mass Development has determined that the application is complete, has issued a letter requesting the town to comment. Comment period ends on February 21st. Mass Development will also be scheduling a site visit sometime shortly. Really, at this point, it's a preliminary plan that is called for by the regulations, together with some preliminary financial information which has been submitted. I'm sure the board has had a chance, or hopefully will have a chance, to review the application in detail. The subsidizing agency is charged with making certain determinations as to the suitability of the site for multifamily development of this type, the suitability of the design for the site, the eligibility of the applicant for financing under the subsidy program, which is the limited dividend nature of the applicant, the fact that the applicant does or does not have site control. And most of those determinations, some of those determinations, I should say, would be heard again by the zoning board as to the site and the design. Some of them are within the exclusive jurisdiction of the subsidizing agency, namely the fundability of the project and the site control. The fundability of the project and the subsidy program that we are seeking approval under from Mass Development is their bond financing, where 20% of the units are affordable to families earning no more than 50% of area median income, which is different from perhaps some of the other 40B applications you've had, rental 40Bs, where it's 25% at 80% of area median. This is a lower income, and it's consistent with the first 40B at Hancock Village that was approved last year. With that, that's basically the process. We're looking forward to again, working with this board and with all the town boards. We, I think, established an excellent working relationship with the town and all officials and boards in the last go-around, and we're looking forward to the same this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Geller.
Thank you. Joe Geller with Stantec and representing Chestnut Hill Realty. So I'll just quickly go through the site design and the building location and building design. So this is the Hancock Village development existing today. You'll see the existing Hancock Village units and the courtyards and all of the street layout that's existing today. And we also show on this plan the already approved 40B that was approved last year. So that's sort of the context of the whole site. Independence Drive here, Gary Road turns into Sherman Road, Thornton Street here, and Beverly Road and the Baker School up in this area. Excuse me. And the horse sanctuary down in this location, and the school's tennis courts there. So the proposal is to build a new building, a 6-story building in this location here. This is the Boston line right across here, so it kind of tucks up against the Boston line. It's 6 stories over a 2-story parking structure. There's a driveway that comes in off of Gary Road, and one of the things that we're proposing here is to, right now Gary and Sherman Road go in this direction, and the proposal is to actually change that direction so the road would come up this way, come into a signalized intersection at this location here. And in doing that, you'll come up the road and then come into a driveway here. There's a turnaround entrance to the garage. The driveway continues around to a circular turnaround here, and there's 3 additional buildings, infill buildings at these ends of the site right here. So what's colored in blue is the outline of the 40B lot that we've created, the lease lot, and access comes right off of Gary Road. The other kind of interesting part of this proposal is that we've taken 2 buildings. There's a building here and a building here that are part of the existing Hancock Village development. I'm sorry, 3 buildings. And they've been included in the proposed lease lot and included in the development. So those buildings will be renovated, and 20% of those units as well will become part of the available affordable rental units. So this is looking up Gary Road. This is Gary Road right here, turning into the driveway. Here's the existing buildings that exist on the site today. You'll turn into the driveway. There's a 2-story parking structure which is built into the hill, and then the building sits on top of that. And as you proceed down that driveway, you'll come to these infill buildings, which is in that turnaround that I showed you at the very end of the driveway. And there's these buildings that fit into the existing courtyards tucked in with the existing Hancock Village development. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Oh, I'm sorry, I do have one more. Yeah. So this shows the three buildings that are being maintained. So again, Gary Road, Sherman Road, the Boston line. So this building on the edge, this building, and this building will all be included in the development.
So the program exists of 226 units in total, of which 180 are market rate and 46 are affordable. We have 66 one-bedrooms, 128 twos, 23s, and 12 fours. Those 12 four-bedroom units are all in the low-rise, 2.5-story infill buildings that Joe referred to. There's 4 in each of those 3 buildings. So we are building 198 new apartments in those 4 buildings. The 6-story building Joe mentioned has 186 units in it. There's the breakdown of the unit types. The 3 2.5-story buildings have 4 units each within. And there are 40 affordable units in the new buildings, and that's the breakdown of the unit types. As Joe mentioned, we have 28 existing apartments that we're going to do substantial renovation to. And once again, these are the breakdown of those existing units. And of those, we will dedicate 6 to the affordable unit count. On site, there will be 350 parking spaces, 283 of which will be within the garage, and 67 surface spaces will be created. The overall ratio is, I believe, around 1.55, 1.54 per unit. Now, back during our the Residents of South Brookline process, there were, well, that's it. Oh, there we go. There was a lot of suggestion that we should focus on this area of the site for our 40B. The advantages were that it was as far as you could get away from the abutters. As Joe mentioned, it's right on the Boston line, and then you have the sanctuary here. And at the time, we took a look at it, and we were trying to figure out how to put it there without demolishing any buildings. And we couldn't figure out a way to do that. The key here is not to, by law under 40B, you can't leave the remaining lot more non-conforming than when you started. And so that has been a guiding principle in us trying to figure out how to put a building in this location. About 6 months ago, we revisited the site, and we came to the idea that if we included some of the units within the 40B parcel, that we could eliminate some parking, existing parking, that would correspond to those units that were going into the 40B lot, and therefore gain access that we couldn't do before. What we looked at very carefully, and what Dan Bennett looked at very carefully, and what wall we basically kept banging against, was the fact that in order to get into the site, as Joe mentioned, over here, or really anywhere else, since it had a perimeter of parking all the way around, we would have to eliminate some parking in order to gain access. And by eliminating parking, you render the remaining lot more non-conforming, and therefore there was no way we could do it without demolishing units. And so that is how we ended up with this configuration of including some of the existing Hancock Village units in the parcel. And with that, we're open to any questions that you might have.
In the existing buildings where you're doing renovations, are the bedroom counts changing?
No.
No. Questions from the board?
Can you give us a parking count? I know that you just went on about how you were doing some creative planning in order to keep keep on the right side of the law here. I'm just wondering if you can give us a sense of what the ratio is between units and number of parking spaces that'll be on the site.
So there are 350 spaces on the 40B lot. And we have 226 units in our proposed 40B. That gives you a ratio of 1.54 parking spaces per unit.
Are you removing any parking spaces from places in other parts of the Hancock Village?
If I understand your question, the answer is yes. And it had to do, it's hard to get back to this. There we go. So there are a handful of spaces, I don't know the exact count, maybe 6, maybe a few more, that we've incorporated into the 40B site here and have eliminated to create an entrance. So 6 spaces were eliminated by virtue of putting them into the 40B lot to gain access. We're able to do that because at Hancock Village, we have approximately 1.14, or 1.3 parking spaces per unit. So by incorporating those 28 units, we could eliminate 28 times 1.31 and not make the remainder of Hancock Village more non-conforming.
So the total project is 226 units, of which how many are?
28.
28 are renovated, so this is 198 new units.
Correct.
How many bedrooms are new? Do you have a?
I can't do that math quick enough, but actually,
I think I saw that
if you ask
somewhere.
another question, I can start thinking about doing the math on that. All right, so this is the new. So you have 54 ones, 114 twos. So that's 228 plus 56. Somebody, I'll give you that. You just said it's 228 plus 56, 54. Is that right? Yeah. Plus 54 again.
$336 new bedrooms, okay.
Yeah.
So you're talking about bringing,
That's in the large building. That's what you asked me.
So, yeah, net new bedrooms.
You'd have to add to that 48.
In the 4-unit apartments in the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
So it would be 54, 228, 54, and 48.
find the calculator. Well, I'll take your word for it. Any other questions?
Well, it sounds as if there's a huge number of new cars coming in. I mean, let's, you don't have to exactly name the number, but it's huge.
We will be presenting a traffic study done by MDM Transportation as part of the ZBA review. And presumably, as last time, it will be peer reviewed. I can give you the preview and tell you that there's adequate capacity. There will be, I don't believe there is any diminution in the level of service at any of the key intersections.
So one of the issues that came up with the last project that you submitted to the town was access by the fire department. I noticed in the rendering that you presented in this slide deck, there's a traffic circle, which looks a little bit tight to my eye. I'm wondering if you've engaged with the fire department and run this plan past them, or you've gotten out there with a tape measure and made sure that a fire truck can swing around and back up.
So we, in the last 40B application, we had spent a lot of time working on the turning movements and turning radius of your fire equipment, so we know it intimately, and that turning movement is more than sufficient, actually bigger than the minimum that's required.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to the public. Just get a sense of the room. How many people wish to speak? Okay, so if you just line up, and we'll take you as you line up. So come forward, don't be shy. And I would just caution on, yeah, I'm not going to initially have a time limit, but please be respectful of everyone's time, and if someone else has said what you're going to say, it's perfectly okay to just say, I agree with so-and-so on that point, rather than giving us the whole point again. So, Ms. Frawley?
Yes, Mr. Wyszynski. Regina Frawley from Precinct 16. I have more questions than anything, and only one comment. It wasn't clear to me how tall it would be, and it wasn't clear to me if they'll have the facility penthouse on top of the floors. So I don't know the answer to that. I would like to. Despite the fact that Boston is exempt from Chapter 40B, I'm wondering if it doesn't mean that Boston doesn't grant permits for using Boston land. They just negotiate it rather rigidly, because they can, because there's no of right with the 40B in Boston. So I'd like to know if that was considered, and if not, why not? Or if so, what happened? Why aren't they using the garage that's empty there? That when we did the site visit years ago, we were told that garage was almost never used, so there's a place existing for parking without adding extra or detracting more green space out there, or empty space, and it is green. And the comment I'm going to make is that when I looked at the online proposal, on one page it said it's adjacent to playground equipment and a tennis court. And then it showed what they are. Those are the very reasons why I opposed taking the land, the green buffers, because we don't have access to those, and they won't either. Those belong to the school. The playground belongs to the school, so it's going to be used by the school children, as we all know now, all day long. And the tennis courts, according to Erin Galantine, are leased, both to the school, as I believe to the school. So it belongs to the town, but it's leased to the school. So I don't think that it may look marvelous if I were renting an apartment, but I actually wouldn't get to use it the way I would have gotten the impression I could. So those are my questions, and that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. What I think I'll do, I'm making a note of the questions. I'll just continue the public comment, and then we'll come back and go through some of the questions. Okay, Mr. Chimenti.
Steve Chimenti, Precinct 16, Town Meeting Member. Just a brief comment, because it's really too soon to make any kind of in-depth comment, obviously, but this project really raises all of the same limitations and problems that the prior project did, if not more so. And it adds has the additional aspect that it is really cumulative, really. All of the problems are cumulative with the prior project. So the traffic is cumulative, and the impact on the neighborhood is cumulative. And that we will endeavor, I think, as speaking for the Precinct 16 members who will meet on this, endeavor to submit in writing the comments in time for the selectmen to consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deb Abner. I live at 265 Russet Road. I just wanted to remind all of you that we live in a S7 neighborhood with Hancock Village. We are already suffering the burden of the new construction that's going to be happening imminently with the blasting of the pudding stone, the loss of green space, and increase in traffic, and we're all concerned about the environmental effects. Coupled with this development, it's only going to add to our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pooh.
I am Bill Pooh, of 249 Beverly Road, a town meeting member. Yes, I think many in the audience, and I hope perhaps some of you feel equally outraged that we're assembled here again to discuss another proposal from Chestnut Hill Realty to excessively develop the property at Hancock Village. As Steve Chimenti said, we'll be sending you more organized comments in the future, but I just had a few thoughts. First, I hope that the town will raise in its response to mass development the question about the legitimacy of mass development to be the agency sponsoring this project, given that its charter is to rejuvenate blighted areas. I don't think that this is a blighted area. The second is that once again in its application, the applicant has tried to say that this is a smart development. But I think we all know that this is anything but smart. First of all, this area is not well served by public transit. I'm going to quote from Mark Levin from his comments to the ZBA during the ZBA process. The biggest difference between North Brookline and South Brookline, though, is, the T lines. As you know, if you're going to be within walking distance from the T, you might, regardless of your income level, you may jump at the opportunity to discard one of your cars because of just the headache of owning a car. This is much more suburban. Our traffic studies were based on suburban usage. I don't think people are going to be so readily likely to give up a car living in South Brookline. I mean, to get to a supermarket, for instance, is not just walking. So they may say one thing in their statements, but when it comes time to argue for parking, they'll say quite the opposite. He said, that was from his excerpt where he was arguing that their biggest concern was being underparked. You're not concerned about being underparked if you're in a smart growth area served by public transit. We've already heard about the fire issue. That was already a major issue for the first development. Now we're going to stress the fire department further in its response times. That's also not smart development. A third point is about, as Steve Chimenti mentioned, the combined impact of both developments. So the first development is 161 units, 333 bedrooms, 45 3 to 4 bedroom units. The second development is 226 units, 480 bedrooms, 32 3 to 4 bedroom units, 530 parking. That's 2.3 parking per unit, as opposed to the 1.8 that was eventually approved for the first project. If you look at where some of that parking is, it looks awfully like it's going to serve some of the existing structures. If you add up the number of 3 to 4 bedroom units and consider those to be like a house, because almost all the houses in that area are 3 to 4 bedrooms, that's 77 new houses, 310 more apartment buildings, a building that's 6 stories tall and 128 houses in volume, 1.5 football fields long. That's in an area where all the other buildings are 2.5 stories at most. I'd also like the town to look into the regulations governing sequential projects. How many times can an outsized project be divided so that it fits within regulations and then be considered to be kosher? Or is there some of the projects that is considered? Finally, since this might be the last time we talk before actually going through a ZBA process, I want to point out something that was very disappointing to many of us about that first process, which is that the town used about $200,000 to pay for legal counsel that did not further the town's interests. I hope that in this time, the town will be more wise in using its resources to actually pay for legal counsel that's going to further its own interests, so that we can better combat this project. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak?
Judy Leichner, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 16. And I agree with much of what Bill just had to say. Definition: smart growth is an urban planning and transportation theory that concentrates growth in compact, walkable urban centers to avoid sprawl. It also advocates compact, transit-oriented, walkable, bicycle-friendly land use. This area just doesn't have that. And as Bill said, this is a cumulative and, as Steve said, project. I found it really interesting that Mr. Levin mentioned that during phase 1, there were lots of suggestions that Chestnut Hill Realty focus on this area where they're focused on. The idea wasn't that this was in addition to the other project. The idea for focusing on that area was that that would be the project, not 2 separate projects, not a first project that paves over all the green space and makes it all parking lots and is in the face of the abutters, as Deb Abner said, where you've got blasting right next to people, but to do something that would be more amenable and something that would work better for the town, for Chestnut Hill Realty, and certainly for the neighborhood of which I represent. So I hope as you put all of this together, you'll look at this as a whole and not as one piece, totally separate. It is a whole project that is going to affect an entire neighborhood that has one school, that, as the fire chief said, when you put hundreds of lives, additional lives at the edge of his response time, you are, whether there are turnarounds or not, you are going to be exposing a lot of people, including his firefighters, as he said many a time, to additional danger. And it just, you know, again, the idea wasn't to have Chestnut Hill Realty say, oh, now that we got this one, we're going to take number 2 as well. That was not the intention of anyone from the planning department or any of the neighbors or anyone else who suggested any of that, that this was going to be a 2-part. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Joni Burstein. I live on South Street in South Brookline. The people who've spoken before me have been really involved in addressing all of Chestnut Hill Realty's proposals so far, and I appreciate it as somebody who's been very tangential. And while I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of anyone else, I can say that there are many neighbors who are outraged and a little bit almost burned out from this whole process, but who came to meetings in the beginning of the process many years ago and were upset about the potential for increased traffic in the neighborhood, for increased crime, which just happens whenever you have more people concentrated. I know you've heard about the impact on the school. I don't know if there's a moratorium on speaking about that tonight or not, but certainly the overcrowding at Baker's School has been a horrible issue. When my daughter was there, it was overcrowded at 6:50. It's now overcrowded at 8:50. And every time I hear the number of bedrooms that are being proposed, it's just more people and more students. And it just feels to me that with the neighborhood being so opposed for so long, it just sends a message of bad faith to me that this is being pushed along and more is being pushed rather than trying to accommodate and work out something that meets the needs of the neighborhood as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Can I ask a question also?
We're going to come back to your questions, but
No, I
yeah.
have an additional one.
Okay.
I probably have 100, but the one that just came to mind was the definition of consistent with local needs. And I hope that there's a little more diligent research into that meaning in Chapter 40B. Because I think you just heard a number of people express to you some of the real seriously negative impact on the neighborhood. And I think you need to have a real definitive, diligent definition of consistent with local needs, which is in fact a standard for Chapter 40B. Thanks.
Okay. Well, let me come back to the technical questions for the team. How tall, and will there be a penthouse? Did you consider going over into the Boston side of the line, and why not the garage area?
I don't know the exact height in feet of the building.
So it's 6 stories?
Although I believe there is, yes, I believe in the package there are the elevations delineate the height of the buildings and the different elevations. But it is 6 stories over 2 levels of garage. As Joe mentioned, the 2 levels of garage are built into the hill. And then you have 6 stories above it. The 6 stories are nominally, I would say, 11 feet floor to floor. That's reasonable. And so it's probably on the order of in the mid-60s above the garage, the podium of the garage.
And then will there be mechanical penthouses above that?
It's likely that the type of mechanical systems that we would employ in this building would require a penthouse, a small penthouse on top.
So
It's
when you-
usually set into the middle of the building.
Right.
When you say 2 stories built into the hill, that doesn't mean underground.
Oh, well, but it technically does, and it is.
So if you're standing at the base of the hill, it's going to appear to be somewhere in the order of 80 feet tall.
It depends on where you're standing. It's certain, well, you can laugh. If you're on Sherman Road, I don't believe it will be 80 feet. If you're down further on Thornton, currently as you go down, it would appear taller from the view that you actually saw. That's the highest, that's where the building will appear the highest, was from the view that we showed you. One comment I'd just like to make. There's been a lot of discussion about how much development these 240Bs represent on this parcel. This is a very large parcel of land, and despite the fact that it has the lowest multifamily zoning in the town of .5, in fact, it's the only .5 in the town, the parcel has, in its current state, is built out to maybe 30.3. And in the end, with both these projects, we will be under both the density and the FAR than what's allowed by zoning. So when we talk about smart growth, one of the things that we mean is that instead of spreading out parcels, buildings throughout the site, we've done some of that with infill, but the bulk of the density is contained in the two mid-rise buildings. So instead of taking up all that green space and the like, we've concentrated it in two particular, if you look at both 40Bs, in two particular locations. And so we're still going to be beneath, the planner, head planner at the time had calculated, I believe it was 436 units were allowed at Hancock Village in addition to what's there now. And our combined total of both 40Bs is less than that.
So we just heard a little bit more about this 6-story building that you're going to, we're proposing to construct.
Yes.
I assume because you're building 2 stories of parking into a hillside,
Yes.
there's going to be some blasting required to clear out.
Without question.
And I respect the fact that all your thinking is sort of preliminary at this point. You don't have a definite plan. I'm wondering if you can give us an approximation about how much blasting might be required for this, what I'll call Hancock Village Phase 2, as it compares to Hancock Village Phase 1.
I think it's pretty comparable. I think it's pretty comparable, give or take. You know, we haven't done the calcs yet, but I think it's comparable.
So you're not expecting to do far less or far more? You think it's in the same ballpark?
Yes.
And then the last question that was asked is, well, 2 questions. Did you consider going into Boston at all to spread the massing? And then how about the garage area on Independence?
We have not looked at the Boston side for further development at this time. And as far as the garage goes, there's 2 reasons that make that not just impractical, but undoable. In order to include one of those garages into a 40B, we would be making the remaining lot more non-conforming, both in terms of parking and in terms of the setback requirements that have to be met. That's to the buildings of the remaining buildings. The other is the NCD. The NCD makes it, although if it was within the 40B, then it's really just you can't do it. You can't do it without making the remaining lot more non-conforming.
Okay, so any other comments? Or?
I have one.
Yeah.
One comment. So you refer to this as a mid-rise building,
Yes.
but that seems to me to not take into account the neighborhood. This neighborhood doesn't have buildings that are this tall. This building will tower over all the others. It'll be much bigger than the others. In the context of this neighborhood, it seems to me that this is actually a high-rise building and a very tall one. And I would suggest to you that that is very much out of the character of the neighborhood and really bringing to it an aspect that the neighbors clearly don't want, and it's completely changing what the neighborhood really is about.
Was there a question?
No, it's a comment.
I use the term mid-rise because under 70 feet it's a technical term, whether it's mid-rise or high-rise.
But it's not
I
really under
understand.
70 feet. It's really going to be, as Selectman Franco points out, much more like 80 feet, because you've got those, the parking in there. So it's really an 8-story building. You didn't intend to go underground with the parking, really, did you? I mean, you're in the hill. The ground is here, the hill is here, you're putting it right here,
Well, that's
Basically.
correct. We're eliminating
the hill.
grade.
Yep. Okay, so, being that, does anyone else wish to speak? Third shot, Ms. Frawley?
Why not? I'm still Regina Ferrelli from Precinct 16. What I actually was suggesting is that that empty garage that the owner's representatives about 5 years ago said they can't get anybody to park there, it's too far away. What I was really suggesting is that why can't some of that parking be assigned over there? Not under the building, but assigned next to, which could eliminate one whole story, first of all. So that's a comment I wanted to make for clarity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I live in South Brooklyn as well, and I have children in Baker.
And your name?
My name is Kelly Schmidt
Okay,
from
thank you.
39 Arlington Road. We live in a buffer zone. I'm coming here to ask questions regards to the impact to our school system. I know this discussion has been up before. It's my first time to one of these open hearings. So based on what I've did my rough calculations, got somehow about 437 additional bedrooms. Is that correct about that?
No, I
More
don't
or
think it's
less?
that high, is it?
With some of those including, so about 400 additional bedrooms. So if you have half of that, you've got maybe 200-plus children that will be coming into the South Brookline school system. Baker and Pierce are the two schools that are over their max capacity at the moment.
They're the
already-
most over there.
They're the most over there.
They're pretty much all over. But
And so with this addition, potential of 200-plus students coming into the area, what is CHR's proposal to help the school district out with that accommodation?
But unfortunately, the Zoning Board of Appeals is not allowed to consider the impact on the schools as part of their decision-making process.
that's under the law.
That's under the law. I mean, we're all very aware of it, though.
All right, thank you.
Right. Anyone else wish to speak?
Is Ms. Steinfeld here? Oh, why don't you come up? I have a couple comments that I hope you will add into our response on this. I was very concerned about the amount of traffic. I went down at after the neighbors invited us to the area on school morning when people were trying to get their kids to school. And those roads that many of the traffic is going to empty onto are small residential narrow streets and already very, very crowded in the morning in particular. And I feel that the additional impact of this second project will be overwhelming on traffic for the area, because I think it is true that there is not really any really reliable, easy-to-use public transportation in the area, so it is going to be a place where people want cars. And that would be my major concern. I think a couple people mentioned the blasting, the cumulative, people were worried about damage to their homes, but here we're talking about twice as much blasting as we were talking before. I'm also very particularly concerned about the impact on the horse sanctuary. from the blasting and from construction. And, I think that's a very sensitive area, and this is going to be right next door to it. And I think that, that's something we have to really look into. And I think other people have mentioned just the fact that this is going to be the second sort of, it's maybe technically a mid-rise, but very tall building for that type of neighborhood. I think the visual impact on the neighborhood is going to be very significant.
So, summarizing some of the comments that I heard is, one, can we look at the projects together with their cumulative impacts, and can that be considered? I heard a comment on questioning whether or not this is a blighted area. And I think, and then the whole notion of smart growth, and smart growth in the context of transit-oriented development. I noticed in the application there seemed to be some emphasis on that, and there's only one bus line that runs once an hour, not on Sundays, that goes through there. Of course, the fire, the ability of our fire department to respond in that area, and whether or not it meets fire code and all that stuff. Especially the circle, is the radius of the circle correct? There was a question about sequential projects. There are some 40B rules that we should look into. And then the whole notion that it's out of character with the neighborhood, and then the point Selectman Daley just brought up, the impact on the horse sanctuary. I'm sure I'm missing something. Did I miss anything? I think, just my own personal comment, the location on the property of this project doesn't quite hit me as viscerally as the location on the property of Hancock 1, and there's less of an impact on the immediate abutters here. So, that's one thing perhaps in its favor, and maybe gives me a little hope if something can be done with Hancock 1, if that's possible. But I don't know about that. That perhaps gets into the whole notion of the cumulative impacts.
I think that there was, Ms. Frawley raised the issue of the playground space and tennis courts, which would not be available to the residents as playground space and tennis courts because they're leased to the school department and are used by the school department. So I think it's important to point that out.
Well, research that so we state that accurately, because I suspect they might be available on the weekends. So we just need to be accurate. Yes.
Hi, my name is Steve Krug, live at 237 Russet. I'm not
Steve, last name?
Krug, K-R-U-G.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not in a butter, I'm on the other side of Russet, but the traffic will be coming in front of my house. I've been coming to these meetings for, I don't know how many years now, for as many of them as I possibly can, and trying to read all the correspondence and the reports and whatnot. I find that pretty dizzying, but I rely on people like Bill Pooh to interpret it for me. But the one thing I just wanted to say sitting here, because I don't think I will have another chance to say it, is that in this whole process, one of the things that keeps striking me is that the developers seem to have never taken the community's feelings into account on any issues. That there have been no sort of good faith negotiations, no sitting down, talking about these issues with the community, and certainly no concessions made in the interest of the community. That's all. So I don't feel like this is not the behavior of good neighbors.
Mr. Galatano.
Good evening, Tom Galatano, Precinct 16, town meeting member. So if I heard Mr. Levin correctly, he pointed out that assuming that the Pudding Stone residences goes through that combined with the first planned expansion, they'd still be under their limit of 0.5. And so in light of the fact that we went through the whole Hancock Village 1 process without having any indication from Chestnut Hill Realty that there'd be a phase 2, I think it would be, in everyone's best interest, especially the board's, to know whether there's a Hancock Village 3 somewhere out there so that we eventually are built up to the 0.5 zoning. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anthony Abner, 265 Russet Road. I just want to state that whether you call this a 6-story building or an 8-story building, Brookline zoning bylaws are very specific about the way building height is measured. If you look in section 5.3 of the zoning bylaws, it states that building height is measured from the street adjacent to the building. So this is clearly going to be an 80-story building, 80-foot building by the definition that's used in the bylaws.
Thank you. 4 times, oh my gosh.
I hope they've been worth it for you, sir. Blasting. I may have a little more experience than some of you there. I've been involved in 40B blasting situations in other communities. Nancy raises the issue of the horse sanctuary, and I would raise the issue of the foundations of the school, the parking lot, and every home that could be in any way on a fault line for this. And what communities usually demand of a 40B is that they, at their expense, videotape every home in the condition it's in, every foundation, anything interior, and that the videotapes are kept by the homeowners. Should there be a single crack, that the owner will be responsible for. And when you're talking about that level of blasting, there's a very strong likelihood. But wouldn't it be something at a time when we're struggling over how to educate our children under a roof with some heat, we could actually be damaging the existing schools. So I really do strongly recommend, because I have been involved in this, that you require the videotaping, and that every person abutting that side of Beverly, and if they want to on Russet, I guess, but because they might be on the same fault line, you have to check with your engineering department to see how that goes, just as they have the underground streams and all that on their old maps. It's very prudent, and we owe that to the taxpayers. Thank you.
That is an issue you should raise before the Zoning Board of Appeals, because we cannot require that.
Okay.
Ms. Steinfeld, do you recall whether that was a part of the approval on Hancock 1?
I don't remember, but I do know there were very strict conditions regarding blasting, and in fact, the fire chief, in consultation with the town administrator, hired a blasting expert on behalf of the town to make sure that the blasting plan prepared and submitted by Chestnut Hill Realty met the needs of the surrounding property. So perhaps the developers remember if that specific videotaping was required, but it was very strict requirement.
Well, they are nodding their heads, yes.
Okay.
An example.
No,
Yeah.
Waltham. Lexington Street in Waltham did 359 units, if I recall. It was on top of a high promontory, and down a sheer cliff at the bottom were a lot of blue-collar homes. Every one of those homes had videotape when the blasting would happen up on top, just in case it affected them down below.
Yeah, I see indications that that's
would have been
part
about
of
10
our-
years ago.
part of this.
It's highly regulated by the state, pre-blast surveys are required, and
Right.
Just in
Can
case,
you
since you weren't
ask
at the
about that?
microphone, he was saying pre-blast surveys are required by the state, and they intend to do them.
If I remember correctly, Judy Leichner, the number of feet, I believe, was something like 500 feet. That doesn't cover very many houses. And I'm pretty sure, they may remember better. I have it someplace in notes, but it covered almost no houses in the neighborhood. It was a very small window. It probably covered some of their property, some of their other units, but the number of feet was not very far from where the blasting was going to occur. And just in case you've forgotten, we haven't, Project 1, 20,000 tons of ledge. That was their number. So now we're talking 40,000 tons of ledge being blasted. And just one other thing, it was mentioned that a former planner said that 436 units could be built on the property. According to FAR, we were told from the first meeting almost, 7, 8 years ago, that it was 500 units. In fact, Mr. Levine did not say that that's what could be built. It was that there were just a handful of houses that could be built without either variances or special permits. It was not that they could do that by right, even though that's what we were all told at the beginning of the process. So.
Okay. The question, can we expect another phase after this, or is this it? Or?
well, I guess the good news is,
You have to go to the microphone.
so the good news is that with these two projects, you guys will be out of 40B, so we will not be able to file another 40B with any teeth in it.
Thank you. The answer was no. Right.
In order to do any additional development, we would have to go through a special permit, the special permit process. So we had those discussions years and years ago, and we didn't get anywhere. But that would be the only way, so. And as a result of us trying to go through the special permit process, there's an NCD currently on the property, and that would be another part of the process we'd have to go through.
Right. Okay. Ms. Steinfeld?
I'm here to receive your direction,
Well,
unless I already have it.
Unless I missed something. So we're going to take, the planning staff is going to draft a response, and then we're going to take this up next week in the same way we did the last project. So more to come.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, these are appointments for boards and commissions, and we have 3 boards and commissions this evening. The first is the Board of Examiners, and we have an expiring term and a vacancy. Currently, only the incumbent has expressed an interest, and so I would like to seek the board's approval for the reappointment of Fred LeBeau.
Aye.
And now comes to the naming committee, and there are 3 expiring terms on this committee. All have expressed an interest in reappointing. There are no other candidates. John Bain.
Aye.
Helen Charlupski.
Aye.
Wendy Ecker.
Aye.
And then there is a slate of candidates that's being proposed for the Holocaust Memorial Committee, of which you heard an update from this earlier this evening, Mr. Brobman. But I guess I will list them in order. Ken Goldstein.
Aye.
Olivia Siegel.
Aye.
Ingrid Cooper.
Aye.
Neil Wyshynski.
Aye.
Kathy Bisbee.
Aye.
Adam Strom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, February 9th. Thank you. Have a good week.